The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today to our webinar. My name is Christoph Schuler. I'm with Theobald Software, and in the next about 30 to 40 minutes, I will be walking you through our webinar materials around integrating SAP Data into the Microsoft Azure and Microsoft Power Platforms. So let's get started. I hope you can hear me okay. If not, I would ask for a signal or type something in the chat window, please, if I'm not coming through clearly. Let me start by introducing our company, Theobald Software. We've been around for over 15 years now, and we're a software company, ISV, specializing in SAP integration. We have grown in these 15 years to about 3,000 SAP customers. I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. And we also have a partner network. For example, we are an SAP partner, a certified SAP partner, but we also have partnerships, a long-standing partnership with Microsoft, for example. As well as we partner with resellers and other services companies that help us bring our solutions to customers. As a company, we are represented in 4 locations today. We are headquartered in Germany, in Stuttgart, and we have sales offices in Seattle, which is where I work, also in Hong Kong and in Paris, France. Here on this map, in the blue shaded areas, you see where we have customers today. The pins indicate our office locations. We've grown as a company sort of with the SAP market, first in Germany, then into Europe, with more and more market share also in the Americas and Asia Pacific. I'd like to share a few references, a few customer references. We have customers large and small among customers that work with us. The one thing these customers have in common, they all have a need for SAP integration. And typically this means some form or version of SAP ERP or SAP ECC, as it's called in SAP's terms. Maybe some of these customers are looking towards S/4HANA already. And also, in many cases, it involves SAP Business Warehouse or BW. Having said that, we do not specialize in SAP systems such as SAP Concur or SAP SuccessFactors or SAP Ariba. These are more recent SAP acquisitions that run on different platforms and technologies. So our product suite is really focused on the more traditional SAP, NetWeaver, and ABAP environments. I mentioned partnerships briefly. That is important to us. We are and have been an SAP certified integration partners for many years. We were certified or are certified for SAP ECC. Also for 2 years already, we're certified for SAP S/4HANA. That allows us to get access to SAP's latest releases, making sure our products are compatible with those SAP releases. And then we also, the other side of our solutions and products is always the non-SAP side, right? Bridging the gap between SAP and the third party or non-SAP system. So in this webinar, we focus on the Microsoft technologies. We have been and are a Microsoft Gold partner. Our collaboration and development efforts around the Microsoft platform goes back to the very early days of when we started as a company. And you see listed below here on the right-hand side some of the products that we offer integration solutions for. Today, I will introduce you to mainly 4 areas. One is SSIS, our integration, SAP integration solution for Microsoft's SSIS. For Power BI, we will take a closer look at that. I will show you an Azure blob storage or Azure data lake example. And then we close out with a demo or an example for how we integrate around SharePoint and Microsoft Flow or Power Automate as it is called now. So let me talk a little bit about why customers come to us and what they're typically are looking for. All customers, virtually all customers we work with have a need for SAP data outside of SAP. And a large driver for that is the BI and analytics space, where customers need access to SAP data. They want to replicate that SAP data into other storage environments, for instance, Azure or SQL Server. And then they will further process the data or do an analytics on that data. Perhaps they combine it with non-SAP data, for instance, maybe Salesforce, and then usually they have some form of end user analytics tool that they use. We also see quite a bit of interest in the area of planning and consolidation. We have some partners that offer planning and consolidation solutions, and the need is very similar there. This process can only take place with access to SAP financial data. And the last area, this is around application and process integration. Think of environments like Office 365, SharePoint. I mentioned Microsoft Flow or Power Automate. Maybe these are technologies or products from Microsoft that you use, and you have a need to bring SAP data into those environments. So those are three main drivers for us, in particular for Microsoft customers that drive the integration with SAP. And so in the past, what a lot of customers have done, they developed ABAP code. So that's a code that runs inside of the SAP system that would run queries, that would collect data, maybe that posts some data back into SAP. The challenge with this approach is that it's typically very cumbersome and time-consuming. ABAP developers are kind of a hard-to-come-by resource. They're also not cheap. And every time something changes, even a small change around a business requirement, let's say the business has a report and they want to add a new field on the report or a new column onto a report, the process has to start all over. The ABAP developer has to open the code again, and it's typically a lengthy process that doesn't always meet the needs and the flexibility that the business requires. So in our experience, what customers are looking for are three main things. They're looking for a process or a tool or a set of tools that is reliable, performant, something that can scale to millions of records. Customers have a lot of business data in SAP, so the tool has to be able to manage that and process that. Number two, the process also has to be secure and auditable, ideally certified by SAP, to make sure the customers are supported with what they have. And number three, also very important for customers, the solution has to be cost effective, not just to acquire, but also to implement and maintain over the years. We're finding that customers are less and less willing to invest in months or years long consulting projects. They would like to see results in days, maybe weeks, but not months. So these have been some of our goals and guiding principles as we developed our solutions and as we make modifications and improvements to our solutions. So with that, I'll start by introducing our products and solutions for SAP integration. I mentioned earlier there's 4 scenarios I will walk you through in this webinar. And the first one is around SSIS. This is Microsoft SQL Server Integration Services, Microsoft's ETL tool that has been around for quite some time. and that is still used by many customers today for data movement from all kinds of systems into other environments. And if we bring it back to SAP and your own SAP environment, it will probably look something like you see on the slide below. Many customers at the moment are perhaps in a transition from SAP ECC to S4HANA. Maybe they have a business warehouse installed and are expanding that or reducing their investment in business warehouse. But it's typically a combination of different environments where SAP data is stored. On top of that, we offer our product called Xtract IS. Think of Xtract IS as plugins into Microsoft's SSIS. So the product is fully contained in Microsoft's SSIS environment, both in the design environment, which is Visual Studio for SSIS, but also in the runtime, which is Microsoft's SSIS server or service. And so these plugins that you see here on the slide, there's 10 of them. There's 10 different connectors or data extractors that we offer in the SSIS toolbox that allow the customer to pull data out of SAP, do the extraction part, and then you can use the built-in SSIS transformations that Microsoft offers, and also the destinations to store the data where you need it. For Microsoft customers, that's typically something like a SQL Server database. More and more we see Azure storage environments like Azure SQL, Azure Data Warehouse or Data Lake, or perhaps an Azure Blob Storage. Let me briefly walk you through these components. I believe this is something that differentiates us from some other solutions in the market. We try to offer you a complete suite, a complete set of data extractors to get to the SAP data wherever it may reside and in whatever shape or form it may be in. I mentioned earlier, we've been doing this for close to 15 years now. And over this time, we have further developed, enhanced, and fine-tuned these data extractors to meet very high demands when it comes to data volume, but also reliability. And more customers want real-time data. They don't want the data to be stale, not even a day, because it matters to the end user. And so that's something we also are taking into account as we further develop these extractors. One thing to keep in mind is all of these components work with SAP at what's called the application layer or ABAP layer, meaning we do not access SAP at the database layer. Even for the table component that you see here on the left, or table join, we always go through the ABAP layer in the context of an SAP user and also in the security context of that SAP user. So let me walk through briefly the table component. We can access any type of table, transparent, pool, cluster tables in SAP. This component is very fast, very performant. It scales to very large volumes. We have retail customers that extract hundreds of millions of records with this component. And it has limited capabilities for delta processing. It accepts filter values where you can say, only give me the rows from this table that meet a certain criteria. For instance, rows that were created after a certain date. So that is possible in terms of filtering your data set or only querying new or changed data. However, that requires that your table in SAP has a reliable date and timestamp. Sometimes that is the case, and in other tables, that's not the case. Which brings me to the next component. For customers that do want reliable change data capture or delta capabilities, we offer two components. The first one is called the Delta Queue. That's been around for several years, and that allows customers to attach to SAP's native BW extractors, the ones that are built into SAP ECC. They're also still available in S4HANA. These are SAP's own ABAP BW extractors, developed by SAP for the purpose of moving data from ECC to BW. With our tool, we have the capability to hook into these objects, into these SAP native objects, specifically into the Delta queue or the Delta information that SAP collects inside of the system, and bring that Delta information out without impacting any existing feeds that you may have into SAP BW. So that's a very popular choice if customers require the most reliable Delta information. The successor of this technology is called ODP. This is an SAP term and stands for Operational Data Provisioning, and it's a framework inside of SAP for data replication. So the same idea here. We hook into the SAP framework, in this case, the ODP framework, to extract data, in this case, in both full and in Delta mode. And I'll show you a demo of that in a few minutes. The other components I'll go through a little bit faster. The first two are the most widely used ones, and the remaining ones are a little bit more dependent on what the customer has in terms of their SAP environment. Function module and BOPI, we can connect to any function, even your custom Z functions or BOPIs in SAP, and bring out the result set. We can also connect to ABAP reports, or what are called ABAP list viewer or ALV reports. Think of one of your SAP users running a transaction. They get a result back, they execute the transaction, they get a result back that looks similar to a table with rows and columns. With this component, we have the ability to grab the result set, this table, and bring it into, in this case, the IIS data flow. Query, that's SAP's built-in query transaction SQ01 or SQ00. Some customers have invested in building queries and info sets inside of SAP. So this allows us to run the queries inside of SAP and then, again, bring the resulting data set into the SSIS data flow. The last three here on the right are BW specific. If you have a need to bring BW data into SSIS, we can do that as well with Xtract IS. We can attach to BEX queries. We can attach to info cubes or info providers. We can also talk to SAP's Open Hub Services interface. That's an interface developed by SAP for mass unloading of data from BW. And lastly, we can also connect to hierarchy information. Hierarchies are stored differently in a business warehouse environment compared to ECC, and that's what this component is for. So with that, I will give you a brief demo. Also, feel free to start any questions that you might have. I will wait to answer them until the very end, but if you have questions now and you just want to capture them, feel free to type that in the window here in our webinar app. So let's switch into a demo. I mentioned Xtract IS is built into the SSIS experience. And that's what you see here on my screen. If you are a user of SSIS today, of Microsoft's SSIS, this will look familiar to you. This is the design time experience. It's hosted in Visual Studio, or it's also called the Microsoft Data Tools. And with our tool, Xtract IS, installed, you will see additional components appear in the SSIS toolbox. You see them here on the left. As I click through the list, these are our 10 components. In SSIS terms, these are data source components that are at your disposal now to extract data from SAP. We also add a connection manager. You see it down here in the lower part, in the middle of my screen. We also add a connection manager for your SAP systems. You see here I have two connections defined. One is to a local SQL Express database. This is my data destination, and my source is an SAP ECC system. I'm going to show you this briefly to show you how you can configure this source. These connection parameters look very similar to a SAP GUI user connecting to SAP. You need an SAP server, a host name. We also support load balancing if you usually connect to SAP using a message server, and a logon group. So both ways are supported. But then you need to specify a username and password. I mentioned earlier, everything we do in SAP happens at the application layer in the context of a user. So with that connection in place, you see here, I simply dragged and dropped the table component over into my data flow designer. Okay, and I can simply double click on it to configure it. This is our table component, one of 10 components that you can use inside of SSIS to get to your SAP data. The table component, I mentioned it earlier, is very easy to configure. It's also very performant. It's the fastest component in our tool set in terms of getting large amounts of data out. It supports joins. You see here I have 2 tables already added using the Add button. Table VBAK, which is a sales order header table in SAP, and table VBAP. I could add even more if I want to. You can browse into the SAP table definitions to pick a table, but a little bit of SAP knowledge in terms of where data is located is required here. And then you choose the fields that you want from each table. You see here I can be selective. In many cases, I don't need the full table. And as you select fields, you build a data set down below. In my case, I now have a combined data set between tables VBAK and VBAP. This is a common construct in SAP. You have a header table, you have an associated line item table, or sometimes you have a main table and then additional text or other tables that are related with additional information. So having this ability to join can be very helpful. You can specify a where clause or a filter. I mentioned this earlier, for instance, to, in this case, tell the tool, only give me records, only bring records back that are newer than a certain date. This can also be parameterized. We're fully compatible with the SSIS notation for variables. They start with the @ symbol, and then you can give this any name, and then the tool will look for this variable in your SSIS data flow in the SSIS package, and will then interpret that date at runtime. I'm going to stay with a fixed value for now, just for testing purposes. I can also do a row count. This can be very useful, especially as you work with very large tables. And then my data flow is pretty straightforward. I only have a source. This is my Xtract component, which is provided by our tool. And then I'm going with my data flow directly into a SQL Server destination. Of course, you can use any transformation that SSIS offers. You can do sorting, you can do merging with data sets, lookups, and so forth. This will be standard SSIS functionality. For debugging purposes, I can use the Start button, and then the package will execute. The query against those 2 tables is now executed inside the ABAP layer in SAP. This is usually very fast. I have a small data set here, 301 rows. We're fully integrated into the debugging and logging experience of SSIS. And now my data is in a table called sales data in my local SQL Server environment. So here's my table, and if I do a select query here, I can see the data being inserted. Okay, I'm going to switch back to my presentation. This was a brief example of our tool Xtract IS and how it works inside of Microsoft's SSIS. One additional comment I'd like to make here, you see it on the left mentioned on the slide. This product not only works within the on-prem version of SSIS, it also works in what's called the Azure SSIS integration runtime. This is Microsoft's integration runtime for the cloud, for the Azure cloud. So you can develop your SSIS packages as you just saw in my demo, but then you can publish them up into Azure, into the SSIS integration runtime for execution there. And our tool will still work even if your SAP system is on-prem, or it may be, for some of you, it may already be hosted in Azure or some other cloud environment. That doesn't really matter to our product. So let me introduce you to the next scenario. This is still around data warehousing, around extraction of data from SAP and storing it in a data service environment. But not every customer utilizes SSIS. Even though they're a Microsoft customer, they might not use SSIS as their preferred or their standard ETL tool. For those customers, we have another product. It's called Xtract Universal. And the components that you see listed here are identical to what you see on the previous slide. So I don't need to reintroduce them to you. They have the exact same functionality as we just talked about. However, the difference being that they're hosted inside of a different system or a different environment, a standalone environment. No SSIS needed. All you need here is a standard Windows environment, a standard Windows server, where you install Xtract Universal, and then you have a designer, it's called the Xtract Universal Designer, to define your data extracts. And then we provide in the tool today 20 plus destinations where you can send your SAP data to. This process can be automated using your automation tool of choice. Some customers have automation tools like Control M, or you can use the Windows Task Scheduler that's built into the Windows OS and is offered as part of the OS for free. It might also be an ETL tool where you coordinate different data movements, including this one from SAP. And the 20 plus destinations have developed based on customer feedback and customer demand. We support the main or the most common on-prem database environments, again, including SQL Server, but also some of the others that you see listed here. And more customers have the desire to store the data directly in the cloud. So in Azure, we support Azure SQL DB, Azure Data Warehouse, Azure Data Lake, and Azure Blob Storage. One other comment, the tool, from a tool's perspective, the data is a straight pass-through from SAP into the destination. So the tool has a small footprint. There is no database underneath. We do some file-based caching, but otherwise we extract the data and then send it directly into the destination. So let me show you a brief demo of how that looks in the tool. I will start. I'm going to have to close this screen. Just give me 1 second. No longer needing this. And I'm going to start Xtract Universal. Okay. So you see the tool here on my screen. Because it's a standalone tool, it doesn't depend on SSIS. It comes with its own designer. And what you see here in this list, in this main list, you see data extracts. Every row represents a data extract from SAP into some kind of target system. A data extract is characterized by 3 things. The first thing is the source. You see it here in the 3rd column. Source is always SAP, and you can have as many SAP instances as you like. In my case, I have 3 instances of SAP defined. I have a BW instance, I have an ECC instance, and I have an S4 instance. The connection parameters look very much like what we saw earlier in SSIS. So you connect very similarly to how a SAP GUI user would connect to SAP. You need an app server or your load balance information, and then an SAP user could also be a system user. We support single sign-on or SNC if that's something that you use. Also log-on tickets if that is available inside of your SAP environment. Okay, so that's the first thing. That's your source. The second thing you define is a type of extraction that you want to utilize, similar to what you saw earlier. Here we have the 10 components that are at your disposal. You just saw an example of a table extraction, so I'm not going to show that to you again. I'm going to show you another data source, which is called ODP, which is Delta capable, as we had discussed. With ODP, also for those of you who are already looking towards S4HANA, ODP gives you a multiple contexts is what are called here, multiple types of source environments or source objects in your SAP landscape. On an S4 system, S4HANA system, you will see 4 different context choices. You can choose the traditional data sources or BW extractors. Sometimes they're also referred to as SAPI. But you can also now use or connect to core data ABAP CDS views, core data services views that were introduced with SAP HANA. You can also connect to HANA informational views. And if you have BW enabled inside of your S4 environment, you can also connect to things like info providers and info objects in your S4 system. So multiple options available, and it gives you a pretty good coverage of all the data inside of your S4 environment. I'm going to show you an example of a traditional SAPI or BW extractor. This is a very common one that many of our customers use, 0FI-GL4. That's a standard SAP object representing general ledger account information. The tables underneath, also many people are familiar with that. Tables underneath are called BSEG and BKPF. These are one of the most important and also 2 of the largest tables typically in an SAP environment. And with ODP, I can access this object simply by selecting it, 0FI, GL. Again, you can use wildcards to browse to an object if you're not sure what it's called. And so this dialog helps you to navigate to the object. Then the object is displayed here on the right. Again, this is defined by SAP. This is standard in your SAP environment. And important here is, in contrast to the table extraction, I have built-in support for deltas. So I can start with a full update if I want to populate a data warehouse, let's say, or a SQL Server database, and I need to pull some historical data to build up my data warehouse with all this history data. But at some point, you probably want to switch to Delta update. And then you take advantage of SAP's built-in Delta mechanism. SAP does that job for us. It identifies and keeps track of all the deltas. And then when we run it, we only get the Delta information. So this is very, very easy to use with just a switch here. There's nothing else to be configured. And I want to show you an example here where I run a data extract. I have narrowed my data selection a little bit by fiscal period, right? So I'm using standard SAP filter functionality to say, give me all the data for the fiscal periods of year 2017. I think that's around 30 or 40,000 rows. Let's find out. And then I have specified Azure Data Lake as a destination. Okay, I'll briefly show you how this is configured. My Azure Data Lake destination uses a storage account in Azure. I'm using a key that was provided to me in the Azure portal to connect. And then with that information, I can also select a container, an Azure storage container that I have defined. I called it SAP file system. And that's all I need here on the tool side. So I can run this ad hoc, or you can automate this. Again, you can use a script, batch file. You can use your tool of choice. Some customers use Control-M, others use Talend or Pentaho or other tools. With this command line, you have the flexibility of choosing whatever automation tool works best for you. So I'm kicking this off in an ad hoc mode at the moment. We also have full logging built in or detailed logging built in. This is especially useful for troubleshooting, but also for monitoring. You can follow along the progress of what it's doing. This is saved in JSON plain text information. So you can also read this log and analyze it in a more automated fashion. My extract is now completed. I can see it ran for 28 seconds and it pulled 46,400 records. And I mentioned earlier, it's a straight pass-through from my SAP environment to the data destination, in this case, my storage container in Azure. So you see here the data. It was created in this SAP file system that I defined as a container, and now I can further process and work with the data. Okay, so this was a brief example and introduction into Xtract Universal, our standalone tool for data extraction from SAP into over 20 destinations. Let's move on. I'd like to introduce you to another capability of the same tool that you just saw, Xtract Universal, which is the ability to bring SAP data into an analytics tool. This is an option available in addition to what you just saw, which was more storage or database oriented. So the bottom half of this slide looks identical to what we just covered. You have the same SAP data sources and extraction capabilities, but now you have the option to go directly into your analytics tool of choice. Maybe you have scenarios where you don't want an interim data store, or you don't want to go through an Azure Blob or SQL store. And that's one of the advantages of this tool. You can easily configure your data extracts to go into different destinations. That's really just a few clicks, so you don't have to redo any work. Certainly, you don't have to do any coding. Or you can also duplicate or copy an existing extract and say, I want this data not only in Azure, I also want to work with this data directly in Power BI or maybe Alteryx. Specifically for Power BI, we have developed a custom connector that customers can use in Power BI Desktop. So let me show you an example of that. I'm switching over to my Power BI Desktop screen. We're plugged into the standard Power BI Desktop experience. You would use the Get Data button in Power BI Desktop, and then click on More. Let me do this one more time. There we go. And then our tool shows up with the name of our tool, Xtract Universal. And then I have to specify one more property, and that is, where is my Xtract Universal server located? In my case, I'm on localhost. I have everything installed locally, and the default port where the data is exposed by our server or service is 8065. That's all I need to connect, in this case, to my local Xtract Universal server. And let me show you one other thing. On the previous screen in the Xtract Universal Designer, we saw our list of existing data extracts. Um, uh, what I'm seeing now in Power BI are the ones that have a designated Power BI destination. If I sort by destination, I can see there are 3 data extract that have the Power BI destination assigned. Some others go into other environments, including Data Lake that we just saw, but 3 of them are designated to be used with Power BI. And that's what I see here. The others are filtered out. I can now select one of these extracts. KNA1, for instance, is a customer table in SAP. I get a preview of my data already, and now I can load and transform the data as I normally would in Power BI. Let me show you an example that I built earlier around SAP accounts receivables. That's a fairly common a need for customers. That data is typically stored in SAP in various tables or different objects. I'm pulling this data from a combined 3 tables. I'm using table BSID or BSID that stores open items by customers in SAP. I'm also pulling data from table KNA1 that has customer information, and then there's an auxiliary table T016T that stores industry codes, which is also something that I want to use on my report. This is a live connection based on the Power BI connector that I just showed you. If I click on refresh, Power BI through the connector communicates with our Xtract Universal tool, which in turn sends the query into SAP, and I can refresh my data on the fly, as you just saw. So within a few seconds, I'm executing a query that refreshes my open items, my customer, and my industry data. And the nice thing is this also works after I publish this report up into the cloud, into the Power BI service. I will need the Microsoft Data Gateway to make a secure connection from the Power BI service to my on-prem SAP environment. But with that in place, I can still refresh the data, my dashboard in the Power BI service, even though my data is on-premise in my SAP environment. So with Xtract Universal, you have a lot of flexibility. One, SAP facing, we give you 10 extractors out of the box that will get you the data regardless of where it lives in SAP and whatever shape or form it may be in. But you can also decide very easily and change very easily where you want your data to be stored or utilized. And that's also important for customers that have maybe just embarked on their journey to the cloud. Maybe they're on-premise with a SQL Server instance today, but they're thinking about moving into a data lake storage or maybe an Azure data warehouse, but they haven't fully made up their mind. With Xtract Universal, it's very easy to switch your destination as your project requirements change and evolve. Okay, and then the last scenario I want to introduce to you is about process integration. So before I get to the final slides here in my presentation, let me switch over to my office environment. This is a little bit different. We talked a lot about analytics scenarios so far, where the requirement is more about large amounts of data extraction from SAP, persisting that in a data store or service. Delta extraction becomes very important. What we're talking about here is slightly different. This is more about read and write access to SAP. This is more occasional use of SAP data. It typically doesn't involve or doesn't always involve a lot of data, but a key requirement is read and write, and there's still a requirement to get the data to the user in a very efficient way, so that a UI like you see here in SharePoint still looks responsive to the end user. So this is an example from Office 365 or SharePoint Online. I have a finance page here, and it's a very simple page. I have two tables or two sections here. In the top, you see a section called SAP Journal Entries. This is where the user, your Office user, can come to this SharePoint page and enter some of the journal entries that they would like to post in the SAP environment. I can edit these entries, excuse me, and I get a form on the right. This could be a modified default form in SharePoint, which I'm using. It's basically a Power App. But one of the nice things here is, for instance, I can have a drop down that shows me account information from SAP, right? I see the account numbers and the description right behind it. And as I type, if I want to look for my cash accounts, for instance, the list will narrow, excuse me, and just give me the matching values, right? So it's easy for me to select a value knowing that this list is up to date with what's in my SAP system. The same here, you could do the same with Cost Center or my debit account. So pretty easy to select that. Once I have that, I can also, in this case, specify an approver, meaning in this scenario, once I click on Submit, which I'm going to do now, a Microsoft Flow or Power Automate process is kicked off in the background, which will now send this transaction to an approver. Maybe my finance manager needs to take a look at this first, at this one transactions, or if there's multiple transactions. And I have specified here an approver. That's my own inbox. So if I switch over to my Outlook environment and I go into approvals, I should see an email from Microsoft Flow that is asking me for an approval. I could use the link here to review the SharePoint entry, or if I know what this is about, I can simply approve this here through email. So going back to my list, I should now see the status being updated to approved momentarily. There we go. It's now approved. And the other thing that happened is because it was approved, we also connected to SAP and created this journal entry. And I'm getting an SAP document back with this number. So I know the posting was successful in SAP, and I could also see this journal posting if I would go in through SAP GUI. So a simple, but I think a helpful example for many companies for how they can automate something or have a request approval type scenario around an SAP process. This was my last example. I will close in just a few points about why we would like to work with you and why Theobald Software is a good choice in our opinion. This is a customer quote that I think highlights two main things that customers really value about what we provide. Number one, our solutions are very affordable. All the solutions that we talked today are very affordable. And because we've been doing this for 15 years, we also have been involved with SAP for a lot of time, and we kind of know the stumbling blocks and the difficulties customers have experienced. So I think once you put our solutions to work, you will quickly find some differences and notice that our products are proven to work in your SAP environment. We're certified, I mentioned it earlier, that helps us be up to date with the latest SAP releases. or S/4HANA certified, and this will continue over the years to come. And who knows what SAP will come up next, but we will certainly keep an eye on it. The tools you saw today are very lightweight. Even the first ETL tool we saw was a plugin into SSIS. The second standalone tool that we saw, it's also not a full ETL platform. It's not intended to be that. It's a data extractor for SAP. And you can integrate it with your existing automation or ETL tool, so you have a coordinated move of data, but utilizing our SAP extraction capabilities. I mentioned the price point already, and feel free to reach out to us to get a quote or an idea for our pricing. Also, if you have a chance, I would like to invite you to take a look at some of our customer success stories. We have quite a few out there for different products, different industries. The one you see on the right is a very recent one we've done with a North American oil and gas company involving the SAP cloud. And so these might also be helpful for your decision process. So with that, I want to thank you for your time. Feel free to download our trial. You see our main page listed here. All of our products are available on a trial basis for free for a time period of 30 days by default. And it also comes with our guidance, our help. We want to make sure you can evaluate the product successfully, and that comes at no cost to you. So feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to assist. And again, thank you for your time today. And I will now open it up for questions. So if you could just type in the questions in the webinar app. Okay, I have a question about can we see the Power Automate connector? Yes, we have time to do that. I will absolutely show that. And then there was a question around pricing for Xtract Universal. We will follow up with you on that part. We will gladly do that, and we'll get back to you. Okay. Okay, so let me show you the Power Automate connector briefly. I will go back into this environment, and actually I will need to go back into Office 365. I will go to my Power Automate environment. And the way we integrate with Power Automate is through the Open API definition. So what I have created through our tool is a custom connector. So in my tool, I basically recorded a transaction for, let me just minimize this, for SAP journal entries. Okay, you see some of my colleagues have created other SAP transactions for purchase requisitions, material, and so forth. And then I need to move this here. Let me go to the edit button. So basically, we export an Open API or a Swagger definition file. This is something our tool produces automatically. This has the definition of the SAP function. In this case, post-JE for post-journal entry. Okay, and that's something you do with our tool set. You create this endpoint. This is a standard REST service that can be exposed securely into the cloud. And then we provide this Swagger or Open API definition with it. When I'm done here, I then also specify a connection. I have to specify an API key to do that. And you see it You see it listed here. Here is my SAP Post Journal Entries connector. And then let me show you the flow briefly. So this is process journal entries. This is what happens when I click on that start button. And then, so the start button triggers the HTTP request. Then we read the data from the SharePoint lists. There's two lists, the approval list and the actual journal entries. And then I trigger my approval. You saw me do the approval in email. If I say yes, this is approved, then we change the approved status on the approval item, and here you see our custom connector. This is the post journal entry action that we plug in through our product. And in this case, I'm using some hard-coded values, but this is where you could replace these values and read them from the list or from the form or what have you. But the main idea here is to surface something to the Office developer or the workflow developer that doesn't require them to know a lot about SAP, right? I mean, these fields are pretty self-explanatory. I have a posting date, a document date, 2 GL accounts, and an amount. This is pretty standard financial stuff without knowing the in and outs of the SAP transaction. Okay, so that's that. Okay. Another question is related to the first product, Xtract IS. Can that be used both on-premise and in Azure? Yes, you can. It's two different products. If you want to run packages in the Azure runtime, then you can also do that, and that is fully supported. So we support both on-prem and cloud SSIS environment. Okay, so unless there's any other questions, I will close the webcast. Thank you again for joining us today, and feel free to reach out to us. You will get a follow-up email. Feel free to reach out to us with any further questions. Thanks and have a great day.